Hi guys, this is Lucky Luke for Float the Turn. I'm just getting ready to bring you a new installment in the Nailing It series for MTT study. We're going to be looking, as promised, just at Preflop this time around, and I'll be bringing this to you in just about a week's time, towards the end of next week. I believe the date we've set for that is the 24th of July. So those of you who were able to join us last time around will know that we spent quite a lot of time looking in depth at a lot of conceptual points and how to study to best advantage and just how to approach the game in a number of ways, how to think through various spots in depth in order to improve as players. Now, while conceptual study is a very important part of the process of improving as a player, looking in detail at hand examples is going to be absolutely key, of course. And I did promise you guys that in the coming installments we're going to be making that a serious priority. So we're going to spend at least 50%, if not more, of the time in the coming webinar just looking in depth at hand examples to illustrate the kind of points I want to cover with you guys. However, in this piece, I just want to profile for you what's going to be covered. So we're just going to talk through the actual key content for the installment. So I wanted to point out first of all that with preflop there often is more than meets the eye. Okay, so of course postflop is the most complex area of the game and the area where even the best in the world need to strive to continue studying and improving and altering their game. Preflop has perhaps arguably a more finite complexity to it, and oftentimes we feel in game certainly that it's fairly straightforward matter of do I open, do I three bet, no, yes, no, fold, and it doesn't always feel like there's that much more to it. So I would like to make the case that it is actually frequently deceptively simple, and that there is a lot more to it than we might think in the moment. And we're going to be looking at kind of unpacking the range of different circumstances we might find ourselves in pre-flop, the range of different types of decisions we made to make, and how best to approach those. Okay, so just to break it down in roughly in order of complexity, we're going to start things off at the fairly straightforward end and talk about what type of opening ranges we want to work with when playing from different stack depths, different effective stacks, and from different positions. We're also going to be looking at open sizings and how we should play at different stages of the tournament with regard to our open sizings and why that is. So some of that's going to be review for some of you guys, and we're just going to look over that at least for a few minutes at the start. Now, one of the main issues with regard to what range we want to open in a specific spot with specific stack depth is going to be how much we can anticipate certain replies from the players left to act around the table. So looking not only what stack do they have, but what characteristics do those players have, what reads do we have on them, and how are we planning to respond to various moves. So how are we planning to proceed when we get flat called by someone in position behind us, how we're going to proceed on various flop textures. Of course, we will touch on, not really in detail, but we will touch on at least planning to the flop when playing a certain line pre-flop. And I will be doing a full installment, at least one webinar purely on post-flop in the coming weeks after this. We need to have a good sense of how we're going to be responding to three bets in various circumstances, and how frequently we are expecting to get three bet and by what type of range. So we're going to be looking at table reads and how those impact on our opening frequencies. And of course we're going to have to be talking about stealing as well, absolutely fundamental part of our pre-flop game. Are we stealing frequently enough? What type of range are we stealing with at different stack depths? How much do we stand to gain? How significant is the gain relative to our current stack? What plans do we have when facing a re-steal? What type of lines do we expect villains to take? What kind of, who are we playing into? Are we stealing versus nits? What kind of adjustments can we make to our normal default game plan when we have reads that plays behind the nits, passives, hyper aggressive bad players, good solid active aggressive regulars, etc. So with a lot of these cases, we're going to be breaking down the player types you can expect to encounter and looking at what best lines we can build at different stack depths, different positions facing certain villains pre-flop. Now, an episode on pre-flop would not be complete without looking at push-fold. Obviously, we spend a great deal of time in both regular speed and, of course, even more so in turbo tournaments between, say, 10 and 20 big blinds deep. And I think it's unfortunately the case that a lot of the learning resources out there, including a lot of the charts, are really full of oversimplifications, and if applied incorrectly or applied without enough judicious interpretation, they can actually lead us astray, regardless of whether we're just mindlessly push botting, which is always going to be a mistake, really, or just kind of interpreting the charts in an oversimplistic way ourselves and not really adjusting them. That can really skew our ranges and put us in a bad spot. So we need to kind of reassess what we can and cannot do with charts, what type of software is out there to help us with push fold, how to actually manually approach it as well and just do raw calculations of our own about it, and what expectations do we have of the villains behind us, how perfectly do we expect them to be playing, and how should that influence our frequencies and our ranges for push fold as well. We'll also be looking at when are we really in push fold mode, or when can we actually do something different even with a relatively shallow stack. What circumstances can we pick a bet fold or a bet call line even when we're shallow? So we basically have a kind of whistle stop tour of the different stack depths for pre's. We'll be looking at true push fold. We'll be looking at calling pushes and how to calculate those type of spots, how wide we can call off. We'll be then moving on up in stack depth and starting to look at when we're playing with a 3-bet shoving stack, and how to judge ranges for making and also when facing 3-bet shoves from other players. Then we'll move up the stacks once again, and we'll be looking at making sized 3-bets. When can we flat versus a 3-bet? Sorry, we're looking at responding to size 3-bets as well as making them. So we're looking at when to flat facing a size 3-bet, when to 4-bet facing a size 3-bet, when to perhaps when to 4-bet light, when to 4-bet planning to fold, or when to 4-bet planning to get it in, when to 4-bet shove as a semi bluff, all this kind of good stuff. And we're looking at a variety of stack depths for those questions as well. And we'll be looking at making plans when we 3-bet as well, making 3-bet slash question mark plans. So 3-bet slash folding, 3-bet slash 5-bet getting it in, whatever it may be. We're looking at how to build the best plans when we do decide to 3-bet, and what kind of range we want to 3-bet in certain scenarios. Okay, depending again on what we expect villains to do with what holding. So how often we expect to get flatted versus how often we expect to get a 4-bet or get a fold. So we're going to be looking at what type of light 3-bet opportunities exist. I think it's very important to open up our light 3-betting range in certain stages of the tournament, and what stack sizes are most suitable for it, and what kind of holdings are most suitable for it. And we're going to be looking at when we might want to be balanced with our 3-bet folding range, and when we don't even need to be balanced, and we don't need to concern ourselves with the villains perceiving us in a certain way, or with any table image considerations, because there are spots where we can have a huge 3-bet folding range and spots where we need it to be somewhat more defined. We're going to be looking at the role blockers play in that, and the role which flop equity plays in defining a 3-betting range. We're also going to be looking at choosing when to flat, whether this is with players behind us or in defense. So we're going to be considering implied odds for, say, flatting an open with a small pair to set mine, this type of thing, or flatting open with suited connectors in order to kind of nut mine, if you like, or nut draw mine, trying to hit a monster of some kind, and what kind of stacks can we do that with. And we're also going to be looking at the implication of what player types are behind us when we're considering flatting an open, and how that may affect our plan or may encourage us to choose a 3-bet line rather than a flat. We're going to be looking at defense, of course. It's a really major part of the game these days, and I want to look at what trends exist in defending the big blind and how we should be approaching that, what kind of adjustments we might need to make going to the flop as well. I'll consider that at least a little bit as a lead into the post-flop webinar to follow this one. And we'll be looking at how to play out of the small blind as well, which is a notoriously difficult spot. So I would certainly make the case that most MTT players, even the good regulars, and myself included, could really do with honing their blind play. And I think it's one of the areas where MTT players have the biggest leaks. Okay. So just one other slide for you guys today. I wanted to mention that we will be covering some slightly unorthodox content as well in the webinar, some alternative lines if you like. And I just wanted to give a few examples of these, so these kind of new twists on old themes, if you like. I want to look at using odd open sizings pre, and when this might be a good idea. What cases might we want to break out of the normal default sizings that we use, which are suitable in most scenarios. So I won't say any more on that now, but that's certainly something I want to go into this time around. I want to look at flatting opportunities with, as they say, tarps or traps. So we're going to be looking at, mostly with King King and Ace Ace, what kind of spots might we want to smooth call and open rather than three betting with those monster holdings, and what kind of scenarios are we just asking for trouble doing that, and what kind of scenarios is it actually likely to be more profitable or sufficiently more profitable that it justifies the higher variance of those type of lines. We'll be looking at some examples of those. And we'll be looking at decisions between 3-bet shoving and making a size 3-bet in spots where we might normally just assume that a 3-bet shove is better. Could a size 3-bet be better in some of those circumstances? Playing to 3-bet call when relatively shallow rather than 3-bet shove. So I'm going to be comparing the merits of those two lines in various situations. And I also want to look at 3-bet folding lines and 4-bet folding lines when unusually shallow. So when in a spot where we are shallow enough that we wouldn't normally consider those lines as viable, and when can we break those rules? When can we step outside of those normal bounds? I also want to bring up a very contentious topic, the topic of open limping, and I'm not going to be bringing it up to trash it and say we should never do it. I'm going to actually be doing the opposite. I'm going to be arguing that we're going to see more of this from good players actually in the coming year or two, and again, I'll leave that a little bit shrouded in mystery for now. But there's quite a lot of stuff I'd like to say about that, and I think we're going to see some new trends in this, not in the recreation amongst recreational players, but from the good regulars. So yeah, I look forward to talking with you further about that, guys. And I'll leave you with just the general thought that the overall theme for what kind of thought process we want to be having when we're playing pre-flop is, what can I get away with here? We want to be playing opportunistically. If the table's playing nitty, for example, again we'll mention it. We'll go into this with examples in the webinar itself. But um, if I've got a table full of 15 big blind stacks, and I think they're capable of using those stacks correctly, so-called correctly, and three-bet shoving quite a lot, then I'm opening a pretty strong range. But if it's a table full of nits on 15 big blind stacks, and I'm confident that you know that most of them don't know how to use that stack and are playing way too tight, then I'm still going to be opening certain holdings I wouldn't otherwise. So we want to be as opportunistic as possible. We want to figure out what the best lines are facing the actual villains we're up against in this particular spot, and never rule anything out. Okay, guys, so I very much hope you can join me on the 24th, and I look forward to working with you there and then. I will post an update in the forum thread devoted to this webinar series, and I will ask for any other recommendations or requests from you guys of anything else you'd like to cover that has a bearing on preflop. I will definitely welcome any hands that you guys would like to bring to bear to the webinar. You can post them in the thread. So I look forward to seeing you there, and in the meantime, guys, all the best of luck in your own games. Take care.